Hello, and welcome to the first ever public reading of Death Comes to Pimberley by P.B. James, read to you by Maria Garcia Bachman. Chapter 17. I look like I have a beard. Breakfast over, Lydia's mood fluctuated with outbursts of weeping, self-pity, terror of the future for herself and her dearest Wickham, and resentment against Elizabeth. If she and her husband had been invited to the ball, as they should have been, they would have arrived the next morning by the proper approach. They had only come through the woodland because her arrival had to be a surprise. Otherwise, Elizabeth would probably never have let her in. It was Elizabeth's fault that they had to hire a hackney chaise and stay at the Green Man, which was not at all the kind of inn she and dear Wickham liked. If Elizabeth had been more generous in helping them, they could have afforded to stay on Friday night at the King's Arms at Lambton. One of the Pimberley carriages would have been sent the next day to take them to the ball. Dinny wouldn't have travelled with them, and none of this trouble would have happened. Jane had to hear it all, and with pain. As was usual, she tried to soothe away resentment, counsel patience, and encourage hope, but Lydia was in too full enjoyment of her grievance to listen to reason or to welcome advice. None of this was surprising. Lydia had disliked Elizabeth from childhood, and there could never have been sympathy or close sisterly affection between the disparate characters. Lydia, boisterous and wild, vulgar in speech and behaviour, unresponsive to any attempts to control her, had been a continual embarrassment to the elder two Bennet sisters. She was her mother's favourite child, and they were, in fact, much alike, but there were other reasons for the antagonism between Elizabeth and the younger sister. Lydia suspected, and with reason, that Elizabeth had attempted to persuade her father to forbid her to visit Brighton. Kitty had reported that she had seen Elizabeth knocking at the library door, and being admitted to the sanctum, a rare privilege since Mr. Bennet was adamant that the library was the one room in which he could hope for solitude and peace. To attempt to deny Lydia any pleasure on which she had set her heart ranked high in the catalogue of sisterly offences, and it was a matter of principle for Lydia that it should never be forgiven or forgotten. And there was another cause for a dislike close to enmity. Lydia knew that her elder sister had been singled out by Wickham as his acknowledged favourite. On one of Lydia's visits to High Martin, Jane had heard her talking to the housekeeper. It was the same Lydia, self-serving and indiscreet. "Of course Mr. Wickham and I will never be invited to Pimberley. Mrs. Darcy is jealous of me, and everyone at Meryton knows why. She was wild for Wickham when he was stationed at Meryton, and would have had him if she could, but he chose elsewhere, lucky me. And anyway, Elizabeth would never have taken him, not without money. But if there had been money, she would be Mrs. Wickham by choice. She only married Darcy, a horrid, conceited, bad-tempered man, because of Pimberley and all his money. Everyone at Meryton knows that too." This involvement of her housekeeper in the family's private concerns, and the mixture of untruths and vulgarity with which Lydia passed on her heedless gossip, caused Jane to reconsider the wisdom of accepting so readily her sister's usually unannounced visits, and she resolved to discourage them in future for Bingley and her children's sakes, as well as for her own. But one further visit must be endured. She had